Hi everyone, in the previous video I had discussed how to create the user services. Okay, so in this user service, in user controller I have created three APIs. One is save user, create account and create investment. But for the create investment we need fund information. Okay, so here in create account, in this investment, here fund ID is there, but I don't know the fund ID, right? So first we have to create the fund in fund services, then we'll call based on the fund id we'll call this fund services. Okay, so this is the fund services. Based on the fund id I'll call this fund services and I'll get the data and I'll calculate these two things, unit of purchase and current investment value. Okay, so before the start, if you do not have subscribed my channel, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. Let's get started. So here this is my fund services. In this fund services I have created the controller package, entity package, repository package and service packages. And here in pom.xml I have added this dependency. One is Spring Data JPA and this is Spring Boot Starter Web and this is MySQL related. Okay, so let's configure the MySQL related. So I'll go to the properties file here and here I'll connect to the DB, right? So we need user database information, right? URL, username, password. So in this user services we already created, right, in the application.properties file. Just copy this one and paste it. Okay, now first I'll create the fund class. Okay, so new class, this is fund. So fund at the rate entity. So fund have some fund id, private int fund id, private string fund name, private string description, private string asset type, private string asset type sub category, private double expense expense ratio, private double nab, this is net asset value. Okay, nab. So I'll create setter and getter method, select all, generate. As always I am creating the toString. Okay, here I'll make this one as primary key at the rate id and at the rate generated value stat is equal to generation type dot identity. Now our entity class is ready. Now we will create the controller class. Here I'll create one class. This is fun controller, and I'll make it as at the rate rest controller, and this is at the rate request mapping. This is fund, right? So slash fund. Now I'll create one API to save the fund. First I'll create the post mapping. Okay, so public fund, it will return fund, then create fund. Okay, here I'll take the request body as fund at the rate request body, this is fund. Okay, so here let's import. Now what I'll do, I'll call the JPA to save this fund into the fund table. Okay, so first I'll create service class and then repository interface. So first create the service class. Let's say fund service. This is fund service and make it as @service. This is stereotype annotation, and here I'll inject this fund service to the controller class. Let's say fund service fund service. Okay, I'm using field injection, then I'll call this fund service dot create fund by passing fund. Okay, now I'll create this method in fund service class. So this is public, it will return fund. Okay, this is create fund, fine. Yeah, now I'll call the repository, right? So first let's create the repository interface. This is fund repo. Now this should be extends from JPA repository. Here I'll pass the entity class name, right? Fund, and this is id, as id is nothing but primary key type, right? So this is fund id, type is integer. Okay, so here I'll mention this is integer. Okay, now repository done. In service class I'll inject the repository fund. So here I'll make this one as @repository. Okay, this one fund repo, fund repo, and inject @auto add. Now I'll call directly, I am returning. Okay, returning fund repo dot save of fund. Okay, here in controller class, okay, this one it will return fund saved fund. Okay, so here I'll return new response entity of fund saved fund, comma http status dot. Okay, instead of returning fund I'll returning response entity of fund. Okay, now it's done. So this is post mapping. The URL is like /create fund. Okay, now it's ready. Let's run the application. Okay, application started on 8080. I'm doing one thing here in properties file, server.port, I'm mentioning 9091. Okay, so now just restart the server. Okay, this is 9091. Okay, then how to send the request to here? So in postman I'll create one collection. Okay, new collection. This is fund service. I'll add one request which is post request, and this is create fund. URL is this is 9091. This is fund and create fund. In body I'll choose row in JSON. In JSON I have to give the this data fund information. This fund ID will generate automatically. I'll pass this fund name. Now our request body is done, so we'll send the request. Now fund name is Bank of India, description this one, asset type this is equity, and asset type subcategory is small cap, expense ratio is 1.35%, then NAV is 123 rupees. Okay, net asset value. So I'll send the request. Okay, I'm getting the response. Now one fund has created. So how to get the fund information? So here I'll create one more APIs in fund controller. So this is get mapping. just copy paste, and this is at the rate get mapping and get fund by id. Okay, or get, okay, this is get fund by id. Instead of this one I'm passing fund id. Okay, so I'm using path variable. This is fund id, and here at the rate path variable, string fund id. Okay, I'll pass this one. This is get fund. Okay, this is also get fund by passing fund id. So here it will also return the same fund object. Let's create the method in service public fund. So this one, our fund id is integer, right? This is integer, so I'll make convert to string to integer. So here fund repo dot find by id by passing integer dot percent of fund id. Okay, and directly I am returning this one. Okay, this will return a optional of fund. So this is fund. Okay, so I'll if fund dot is present, then only I am returning this one. Okay, I'll make this one variable like fund info equal to null. Then here I can make fund equal to fund info equal to fund dot get. Okay, so I just returning this one, return fund info. Now this controller also ready. I'll just hit this API. Okay, just restart the server. Okay, now fine. So I'll create one more here. Just duplicate this API. This is get fund. Okay, this is 9091 fund. Instead of create fund, this is get fund by id, and here I'll pass 1. The fund id already it's 1, right? Here. Okay, passing 1. This is 404y. This is get request, right? Get mapping, get fund. Okay, I just missed something. Need to give one class. Okay, restart the server again. Send. Yeah, now so this fund id 1 has this information. Okay, now our two services is completed. Here user service is completed and fund service completed. So in the next video I'll tell how we'll call this API, this fund get fund API from the user services. Okay, so we'll use web client. Okay, thank you everyone. We'll see on next video.